Okay, welcome everyone to Ask an Expert. We've got about a minute before we're going to get underway. I'm just trying to get all of our technology working properly, and I can see that our participant count is climbing rapidly. So that's great news. I knew Mike would be a popular speaker. He certainly was last time. So just give us another half a minute or so, and then we'll get going. Okay, I think we're good. But people shouldn't put me in charge of technology. Okay, well, welcome to Ask an Expert for Friday, September the 25th, 2020. I'm Deirdre Pickrell, and I am the Dean of Student Success for Yorkville University and Toronto Film School. And on behalf of the Student Success Unit, we are thrilled to once again bring you our Ask an Expert series. We do this every Friday at this time. We welcome an expert from our community come and talk to our students and the Yorkville and Toronto Film School family about a topic of their choice. Our speaker today is Mike Watkinson. He's going to talk on stress management for emotional intelligence for probably about 15 minutes. We're never sure. And then we're going to open it up to questions. I have disabled the chat feature today. I just learned how to do that. So those of you that like the chat, it's not going to happen today because we really want you to use the Q&A panel. That's the easiest way for us to monitor all of the questions that come in and for Catherine to feed them to our speaker. So on that note, I'm going to turn you over to Catherine Bonney, one of our amazing career services people. And she's going to host Mike and introduce him and then manage all of the questions. And I'm going to be here behind the scenes just in case anybody needs something. So Catherine, over to you. And Mike, once again, thanks so much. Great to see you. You're muted, Catherine.
Okay, thank you. Sorry about that, everyone. On behalf of the Student Success team, I'm happy to welcome Mike today. As Deirdre said, he was on our Ask an Expert webinar last month, where we discussed how emotional intelligence is paramount for maximizing our potential in both our personal and professional lives. In a continuation on that subject, we will examine the ever important topic of stress management. We will discuss how principles of neuroscience can play a pivotal role in increasing our current level of self-awareness and self-management, and ultimately our ability to better control our own stress levels and that of those on our team. So Mike is a director of Next Gen, and he brings over 15 years of experience leading teams and individuals with a focus on relationship building and cultural development. Mike's passion is working with junior and intermediate level employees, providing them with the tools and mindset required to maximize their potential and positively impact their firms and industry. So thank you for joining us, Mike, and I'm going to hand it over to you.
Thank you very much, Catherine, Deirdre, for this opportunity to come back. And hello, everybody. Appreciate you taking the time out of your schedules to join us again. It's certainly an honor to have received the invitation. So where we left off last month, as Catherine just said, was a discussion around emotional intelligence and how experts believe it's so important to all of us, as it really is a catalyst that allows us to maximize our potential. We spend a lot of time talking about self-awareness and self-management, but then kind of segued over into how that even impacts when we're working in teams or leading teams. So what I wanted to discuss this month, as Catherine was saying, is stress management. And I provided you with not really a quote, kind of paraphrase comment from Dr. Daniel Goleman, when he said that emotional intelligence is the gap in between our emotional reaction and logical response. And I'm of the opinion that the chief driver to being able to achieve that gap is being able to understand and control our own level of stress. So when I refer to stress, what I'm talking about is just the physical aspect, not the cognitive, not the worrying, not the ongoing thoughts, just the physical, just the increased heartbeat like I got going on right now, the breathing pattern changes, the increase in blood pressure, that pit in your stomach, sweating, all of that sort of stuff. The best way that I heard stress described, I'll write it down for you, was by a source I highly recommend, a guy named Dr. Andrew Huberman. He's a neuroscientist from Stanford University in California. And Dr. Huberman very succinctly defines stress as when our body hijacks our brain. Very basic, very short. I hope you can read that. I apologize for my terrible writing. That's really what's going on. Our brain has perceived a threat or a demand, and it has engaged our body to try and do something with it. Now, in a life or death situation, that's amazing. But for trying to deal with everyday stress, such as you're late for a meeting, or someone challenges your opinion, or maybe criticizes you or whatnot, it's not that advantageous. It's very, very challenging. So what causes us to feel stress? The part of our brain that first establishes this threat or demand is called our amygdala. I may have referenced the term reptile brain last month. That's pretty much what people are talking about. So our amygdala determines something's a threat or a demand. It sends a signal to our hypothalamus in order to engage what's called our sympathetic nervous system. That's our stress response system. The hypothalamus goes to our adrenal glands to get some stress hormones. Our glucose goes up, and we get this flood of energy. And it's that energy that causes our hearts to beat and our blood pressure to go up and our breathing pattern and sweating and all that. Now that reaction takes like half a second, and it is awesome for trying to keep us safe. If we're driving down the highway, someone cuts us off, it's this system that allows us to move out of the way to get safe. But it is dreadful for all these other sort of day-to-day challenges, like if you read something on a screen or a text message, because you get this flood of energy and nowhere to go with it. So as I may have mentioned last month, our goal is to not try and stop this from happening, because we can't. And quite frankly, in a lot of cases, we don't want to. So let's not waste our energy trying to stop this from happening. And please don't give yourself that terrible advice of, there's nothing to worry about. Stop stressing, what's the big deal? Because you're not going to do that. So let's not waste our energy there. But instead, try and understand what our own triggers are, but just as important, what the physical reactions are when we are stressed. So then we can put some control mechanisms in place to give us the best opportunity to respond and not react. That's really self-awareness and self-management in a nutshell. So as I see it, and perhaps I'm oversimplifying things a little bit here, but I think there's three primary categories of stress that we deal with in a day-to-day. The first one I won't even write down. That's the life or death situation. I have no advice other than you please do what you need to do to stay safe. But the other ones, we can call the first one delayed stress. This is a situation where maybe your heart's not beating that crazy, or it's not that much of a physical reaction, but it's something that's causing you stress that's a couple days or maybe a week or a month in advance. An example might be you get issued an assignment, you have a job interview, you have a webinar to do with Yorkville University that you've been stressing about all week, that type of thing. The next one would be more of the immediate type of stress. So this is, you're late for a meeting. Someone challenges your opinions or your beliefs. Someone criticizes your character. You have, again, back to that webinar that you have to work on for Yorkville. I'm going to say one word that kind of encapsulates all of that, and that is our ego. Because that's really what's being threatened when all of this is going on. And I can expand on that or give you an example afterwards. So how do we deal with each one of these? Now, you've all had an assignment to do that you were stressed about. Difficult assignment, you got a busy week ahead of you. And you also know that as you start progressing through completing that assignment, that level of stress goes down and it actually starts to feel good. And when you hand that assignment in, it feels great. We all understand this, but I think that if we can realize really what's going on and how these systems work, then we can perhaps utilize them more efficiently or more on purpose in order to help us get to that maximizing our potential thing I mentioned earlier. So how this actually works, when we get that stress, that agitation, that pit in your stomach, when you think about something you have to do later on, the stress hormone norepinephrine starts to rise. And there's actually a critical point in all of us where when the level of norepinephrine gets above this critical point, it's why we quit. It's kind of a subset of quitting. Doesn't matter if you're running a marathon or working on an assignment. Basically, your brain says to your body, I'm done, I'm not helping anymore. Now, if this was the only system Mother Nature gave us to get over a challenge, we probably wouldn't have done very well as a species. So she introduced sort of a reward system as well. This great little chemical we all have in is called dopamine, that when you start accomplishing something, you get these little pulses and it feels good. And it's sort of our nervous system's way of encouraging us to make progress. Perhaps you've been sitting there working on an assignment or starting to work on an assignment and you say, on Monday, I'm just getting questions 1 to 3 done. And you sit down and they're frustrating and they're challenging, but you manage to slog your way through and you get those questions done. And you know what? I got enough energy. I'm going to do number 4. And you do number 4 and you look and it's getting late, but somehow you manage to do number 5 as well. That's because of that dopamine. You get 1, 2, and 3 done, you get a hit of dopamine. Number 4, a hit of dopamine. It really has 2 benefits for us. Number 1, it feels good in order to encourage us to keep moving forward. But it actually helps to inhibit that level of norepinephrine, that stress hormone. So stress goes up, and as you start working on it, it actually pushes that level of norepinephrine down away from that critical point and giving us more energy. This is something elite athletes have tapped into, people that can push themselves so much farther than where us mere mortals can. So how do people like Dr. Huberman and others advise us to utilize these systems? I was listening to an endurance athlete, runs marathons, and what this gentleman said was, when he runs a marathon, he doesn't view it as running 26.2 miles. He views it as running 1 mile 26.2 times. So his goal isn't the finish line, it's to get to that street corner or that light post. And when he does, he purposely self-rewards mentally. He's taking advantage of these systems. So Dr. Huberman would tell us, we don't have an assignment. We have a series of little sub-goals that as we complete them, we want to learn how to self-reward. I'll tell you kind of an embarrassing way that I do this. I still kind of old school. I sit down, pen and paper, and write out a to-do list most days. And if I complete something that's not on my to-do list, you can be assured I will write it down so that I can cross it off. Odd little habit, but I know I'm not alone. And there are other people who do it, and we're basically taking advantage of this dopamine system. It feels good to cross it off. It's my nervous system's way of saying, good, now do something else, keep progressing through your day. And you can purposely do this. Set mini goals and then figure out how to self-reward. How am I doing for time? Okay. The bottom one here, controlling this immediate stress, I think is the heart and soul of emotional intelligence. It is so challenging, something that we probably will never perfect, but you can certainly get better at it. I'll just explain how I try and deal with it. And I say try for a reason, because I fail frequently. So something that I have meaningfully tried to do is figure out what the physical reactions that I have when I'm put in a state of stress. So for me, my heart beats like crazy. And then I get this kind of pit in my stomach. If you were in the room here when Deidre and Catherine were introducing me and you had your hand on my chest, you'd think my heart was coming through. So I identify in that moment that I am in this sort of body hijacking brain sort of state. And I also identify that I have basically 3 options, and that's the fight, flight, or freeze. My recommendation, when you get that text message or somebody says something to you and you get that feeling, maybe for you it's sweating or it's focus, a really laser focus, whatever your reaction is, my suggestion is always freeze. Always buy yourself time. That doesn't mean that you're not going to respond. Of course you are, or you're not going to do something absolutely, but you want to try and freeze for as long as that situation allows you. So if you have the opportunity of walking away from the conversation and coming back, do it. For those of you who are married or in long-term relationships, you know what I'm talking about. If you can't do that, then maybe just tell the person, you know what, I've never looked at it that way. Can I think about it and get back to you? If you can't do that, then maybe ask the person, well, it's interesting, can you expand on that a little bit? The idea is to do something to get that level of autonomic arousal, that level of stress down so that our logical brain can get involved. That's the responding, not reacting. That's that gap. that Dr. Goleman talks about. Now, the ability to do this, as challenging as it is, the ability to do this can be the difference from getting a job, keeping a job, getting a promotion, being a valuable member of a team, leading a team, being impactful to the people that are on your team, or, take the whole professional thing away from it and just imagine how much better your personal relationships could be if you had that ability to just settle yourself and logically say something instead of reacting and then quickly wishing that you had not done that or said that. And Catherine, maybe I'll, just like last month, maybe I'll stop there, because this is when I get to the point where I start to sound like a motivational speaker, and I'm not. So maybe I'll cut there and we can get into the Q&A portion. That's about 15 minutes, yeah?
Actually, if it were up to me, Mike, I would let you talk on for another 20, 15, 50 minutes. So, but we have some questions that I'm going to address and ask you. So here we go. What we'll do is one of the questions is, Mike, can you speak to the role of this in a chronic somatic symptoms? So.
No. Flat out, no. I apologize. I'm not a neuroscientist or a doctor. I kind of stuff through the lens of emotional intelligence, and meaning what subjects are out there that can allow me to assist in my own self-awareness and self-management. Then I try and put it into my own life, and if it works, then I'm comfortable getting in front of people and trying to advise. Now, I'm aware at a high level what you're referring to, but I am absolutely not qualified right now to answer that question. Sorry, there you go. Now my heart's going like crazy, but.
You know what, Mike? I shouldn't have asked you that question, but I figured you're so knowledgeable and I've learned so much from you that even on a personal or professional level, I'm going to use some of the tips. So I do have some questions that I can definitely ask you, and I'm sure you can answer. So one of the questions that I have for you is, can you recommend some techniques or practices that can help overcome our stress response system? Like, I know you addressed some, but
yeah, and whoever asked that previous question, I apologize. Maybe if I come back again, I'll have an answer to that one. Yes, I can absolutely try and field that. If you look at it sort of stress long-term or short-term, I won't get into the long-term, but I can definitely advocate for the benefits of meditation. Look into that, or you can contact me through LinkedIn or email or whatnot, and I can kind of explain how I do it. It's not a long process, 10, 12 minutes a day, but it is certainly beneficial. It's kind of like weight training for your brain. But more in the immediate, there's some things that we can do when we have that kind of immediate stress I was referring to. Number one, always, is that self-awareness, is just being able to understand what's going on. Body's hijacked your brain, this physical reaction. That is absolutely the best way of dealing with it. Just knowing how you're feeling and why you're feeling it is so freeing. But beyond that, there's a couple of tips I can give. Let's see here. Oh, my spelling is okay. Panoramic view. So when we're stressed, we focus. What the science community will refer to, our eyes foveate inwards. It changes our perspective to kind of portrait mode. So if it's a text message you read or an individual who has said something to you, that becomes your focus and everything else kind of fades away. Or if we want to be able to try and control our level of stress, we want to do the opposite. So what we can do in kind of real time is to actually force ourselves to get more of a panoramic view. So I'm staring at the camera here, but I can see the board, I can see this wall, my ceiling fan, the table down here. And that's something that's easy enough to accomplish. And it's been proven that it will actually take us down a couple of notches. Ever stood on a beach looking out at the horizon? It's extremely peaceful. So we can do the same thing. You just want to try and get your gaze to be out as far as you can. Sort of try and get a feeling of yourself being in the surroundings. A third one, this one's a little more intense, and I'm probably going to spell this wrong. It's called a physiological sigh. Breathing is one of the best ways of controlling stress. it engages something called our parasympathetic nervous system. That's kind of the rest or digest portion of our nervous system. And we already all do this physiological side. For those of you that have dogs, if you hear them about to go down for a nap or a sleep and they let this big sigh out, this is what they're doing. We do this when we're sleeping. If any of you are claustrophobic and you're in a confined area, this is probably how you breathe. It's actually triggered by a series of neurons at the base of our brain, and it's a way of balancing the oxygen and carbon dioxide that's in our system. And what it is, it's 2 inhales followed by an exhale. Not one long inhale, 2 distinct inhales, and then 1 exhale. So at risk of embarrassing myself, it's in, and then exhale. So that's what you do. And if you do that 2 or 3 times in a row, again, it's been shown that it will drop down that level of stress. So neither of these 2 things by themselves are going to probably bring you from a high level of stress down to baseline, but they can certainly ratchet it down a little bit. And one other thing, is there another one I can give you here, or should we just leave it out there? Yeah, okay, there's one last technically called Optic Flow. Go for a walk, ride a bike, go for a jog. I guess it could work if you're in a car or on a motorcycle, but there's a benefit to when we're moving. That kind of lateral eye motion actually relaxes us a little bit. So you have a test that you're stressed out for. Don't sit there and stare at your phone beforehand. Go for a walk. You don't have to do these physiological sighs as loud as I did. You can certainly do it in the classroom. And then instead of sitting there and staring at your notes, maybe sit back and stare at the whiteboard or the teacher's podium and just let your eyes go out to the side of the room or the ceiling. And all 3 of these things added, again, aren't going to drive us right down to baseline, but they can take us down a couple notches. Maybe they're the difference between responding, reacting, or doing well on the test or doing terrible. We'll leave it there, Catherine.
Okay, thank you. That was very interesting. So another question that we have is, when a problem is persisting and you can use stress response that we learn in our first responder, however, that issue chases you down, how can you diffuse without losing face to both person and both parties where both parties are given respect?
Can you do that one more time? I think I got it, but just, yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Sorry.
So when a problem is persisting and you use stress response that we learn in a first responder, however, that issue chases you down, how can you diffuse without losing face to both person where both parties are given respect?
Well, maybe I'm misinterpreting the question. I apologize. I'm not sure if there's a specific system that you're referring to that you've been instructed. Most of this is very much my understanding of it and how I utilize it. So I'm challenged in perhaps answering that question. You have multiple people involved. One thing I could say of multiple people involved, and this kind of goes back into what I was referring to last month in the benefit that empathy provides to any sort of relationship. And this self-awareness and self-management, this working hard to control stress, is, I think, the gateway to being empathetic. So you mentioned about saving face or respecting people, of which empathy is paramount. I think that it's very challenging when we're in a state of high autonomic arousal, when we're stressed out. It is extremely challenging to communicate. It's really challenging to listen to someone that has a different point of view. It's challenging to be criticized. It is certainly challenging to empathize, because in that moment you're protecting yourself. So being able to be self-aware and manage that stress, drag that stress down, kind of opens up that communication gateway, which is, I think, the key to becoming empathetic, even if it's debating on a topic or you're in between 2 parties. That empathetic debate that we talked about last month being so important to a situation. I'm not sure, I apologize if that doesn't answer your question. Maybe in written form I'd be able to expand on it, but that was the first thing that came to mind.
Oh, that was very good. Thank you. So does being left or right-handed affect the way we deal with stress?
Another question for a neuroscientist. I have not heard that. I'm trying to think of left or right-handed people that I know that may be good or bad at it. I'm going to simply say no. I have a anything that along those lines. And I don't believe in that moment that what-handedness you are is going to aid or prohibit you from controlling yourself. It's a sort of fight or flight response, that protection response, even if it's protecting our ego. I can't imagine how one hand or another would really dictate when most of it comes to your own ability to lean on yourself, to buy yourself some time. And the biggest thing I could say is that this takes practice. I fail at it a lot, and I'll practice it to the day I die. And if I live to be 1,000, then maybe I'll have accomplished what I'm seeking to accomplish. But short answer, I don't believe it would make a difference. Maybe I'll research that, but I don't think so.
Okay, very good. So another question that we have here is, my anxiety spikes with specific people. And when I talk or speak to my boss, I get anxious. This is an expectation gap in my role, and it makes communication confusing and awkward at times. Any tips on how to handle this?
Ditto. Yeah, that's one thing I can say. Same here. I get falsely accused of being very calm, and it's just not the case. I experience exactly what you're referring to. So what I try and do is, where possible, prepare. If you have to go in, you know you're going to have a conversation with your boss, prepare for it. Think about what you want to say ahead of time. Maybe try and anticipate what they may say back so that you can get ahead of it. You can never over prepare for a situation. The other thing that I do is, and I think as you start going down a real purposeful pursuit of trying to increase your own self-awareness and handling that difficult task of trying to improve your self-control, it sort of takes the monkey off your back in a sense of, you realize everybody else has their own issues too. And for all you know, your boss is every bit as stressed as you are. Don't let it reflect on you as a person that you have these challenges that we really can't stop. But instead, take that monkey off your back. Try and be aware of the physical sensations you might get when you talk to your boss. One of mine is, I for some reason have trouble breathing. It's like I have 50% of the lung capacity. So how I get over that is, I'll say a sentence, take a deep breath, then say my next one. And it sounds very fragmented, but it gets me down the path that allows me to have that conversation. That might not be your thing, but what I'm trying to say is, if you can pay attention to the feelings that you get when you go to speak to your boss, you can get ahead of that. If you can prepare or even just know what to do, you can then start putting some control mechanisms in place. Mine is breathing. Yours might be something a little bit different, but take the monkey off your back if that's there, that you have some flaw. I used to do that to myself. That's not true. We're all just hardwired a certain way. And if we can learn how we operate, then we can learn how to best control it.
Very valid point. So another question for you, Mike. How can an individual's stress management impact the results of their team?
Yeah, great question. If you've meetings, example, meetings get a bad, kind of a bad rap, and people don't enjoy meetings, they're long, whatever. But if you've ever been a part of a meeting that went really well, where people around the table are getting along and they're respectfully debating and kind of challenging each other, but in a good manner, those meetings are amazing. They're invigorating, they're encouraging. They're normally when kind of the best brainstorming is done and people volunteer for things and others volunteer to help them. They're a lot of fun. On the other side of that is those argumentative meetings where people are going at each other and you don't really make a lot of progress. And in that instance, people aren't really debating over the topic on the table. It's really the people around the table that are debating. You'll hear people say, oh, I was just really, really passionate. That's why I was arguing. And I find that interesting, because how come an hour or so later, that passion is gone and they can talk about a subject very calmly? There was passion in that conversation. I totally agree, but the passion wasn't the topic. It was them protecting themselves and their opinion was probably challenged. So how does this impact a team? Being able to control yourself can prevent that argument. But further to that, back to kind of what I just said a moment ago, this daily pursuit of trying to be more self-aware and the effort of having higher level of self-control sort of is a gateway to empathy. So if I'm sitting in a meeting, I know I don't want someone to cause me stress, but I'm also aware that I don't want to cause stress to somebody else. And if I do that and I'm able to see what happened, then I can maybe try and apologize in that moment or explain what I had said. It doesn't sound like a big deal, but it can absolutely make or break from trying to accomplish a task successfully or just sort of checking the box that the task was completed. And that's sort of what last month was about, is if everyone sitting around that table is working diligently to control their stress, to manage self, to be self-aware, you're putting yourself up for the best opportunity to maximize that result. The opposite is those very combative meetings that are no fun at all.
True. And being empathetic is an important soft skill that we need for not only school, but also work and in all our daily lives. So thank you for mentioning that. So another question, and some of us didn't write this down. Can you share the name of the doctor where you did your research? And
yeah, I stumbled across this guy actually through Joe Rogan's podcast and have watched hours upon hours of his work. His name is Andrew Huberman. He is a neuroscientist out of Stanford University in California. He runs his own lab, Huberman Lab. For those of you on Instagram, I think it's at Huberman Lab. I'm not, but very smart guy, very engaging. And I'll warn you that if you do some research on him, you're going to realize a lot of what I said today is plagiarized. Please don't hold it against me. He's just fantastic. And his life work right now, or his lab's work anyway, is stress management and focus and then sleep, and how all these things interact and able to allow us to really maximize that potential. So his lab and what he speaks on is right down the alley that I find interesting. So Huberman was the start, and then he mentions a series of his colleagues at Stanford that he's done reports with, and I'll research some of their work as well, but highly recommend you checking out Dr. Huberman.
Excellent. Thank you so much. So we have come to unfortunately, the end of our session. We have tons of questions. So I'm sure the individuals that have joined us today will be sharing those questions through the student success team. So we'll share those with you as well. So again, on behalf of the student success team, I want to thank you. And on behalf of our students at Yorkville University and the Toronto Film School, this has been an incredible session. Thank you for sharing your expertise and your strategies and your tips. So I appreciate your time today. It was very valuable. And thank you everyone for joining us. I hope that you will all have a wonderful weekend. Stay safe. And
May I just really quick, one last thing?
Of course, yeah.
And thank you for the invite. Ever since I did that webinar last month, I've been following the other speakers and what Yorkville's doing. I understand you have a mindfulness podcast as well. I just wanted to commend the efforts of Deirdre and Catherine and your colleagues for doing what you're doing. A couple of things jumped out at me when I see the other speakers. Number one is a huge feeling of inadequacy, but that's my own problem. But I'm so impressed by what the university is doing, and I'm sure the students appreciate it. It's fantastic. So I tip my cap to your efforts.
Well, thank you for saying that. But you know what, Mike? You do not have to be stressed for ever doing any of these sessions because you are a pro. So thank you. And we'll be in touch. Okay, thanks everyone. Bye for now.